Welcome to Unlock Your Soul Memory. My name is Iris Fisher. Today, I'd love to explore the term consciousness a bit further. I mentioned it yesterday and I realized that it deserves a bit more attention. So, what does consciousness mean? And it actually developed over the time. There were different ideas around consciousness from century to century, maybe even. So today we have this idea. It's mainly shaped by psychology. So we have the consciousness, we have the subconsciousness, and there is a state of being unconscious. So the consciousness is the aware state, the subconsciousness is the underlying functioning. And if you are unconscious, even that is not active any longer. So you can imagine that like an iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is the consciousness, and the everything down below under water, that's the subconsciousness. So you're mainly run by the subconsciousness. And nowadays, you very often get the impression that it's a very physical thing, that our consciousness is based on chemical activities within the brain. It's analyzed and it's described by the nerves and everything that's going on within our bodies. So very physical, materialistic. Someone who shaped this idea was René Descartes. He lived around 1600s, so he died 1650. And he had this very cruel experiment. You for sure remember that from school as well. So in biology class, they were telling us that he used dogs. He somehow bound them and cut them open, and he touched the wound. And when they were howling and when they were whining, he described that as an automatic response, like a machine. So that was more or less maybe the beginning of the age of reason, when mankind was trying to describe everything from a very observatory perspective. And the observatory perspective is amazing, yet it was not always that way. If you go back 150 years from René Descartes, one example is in the year 1478, where a bishop in Bern, Switzerland, excommunicated a type of grain beetle because they caused so much damage. And around that time, in the Middle Ages, there were several other cases where type of insects or animals were excommunicated from certain regions. In other situations, they had to stand trial. So they had a defendant and they were accused for the damage they did. What's the thought process behind it? Because nowadays we find it quite ridiculous, but you have to look at it from a conscious perspective, like from a perspective where you take the consciousness into consideration. And there, or even in the shamanic tradition, it's believed that there's an oversoul, and this oversoul has a type of consciousness. So they were talking to this kind of consciousness and letting it know it's not welcome here, it has to leave. I don't know whether it worked and the caterpillars left in the end, but to me, I find that very interesting. So in those times, it was still, I'd say, known and familiar that everything has a consciousness and everything forms out of consciousness. We wouldn't have this kind of shape if it were not for our specific consciousness. And keeping in mind and seeing that this awareness of consciousness developed over the time, and we now ended up at a place where we almost feel like robots ourselves, like automatons or machines, because the consciousness is barely getting any attention. I think we might walk back a bit and reconsider the possibility of everything having a consciousness and approaching everything from that direction, from that perspective. And you can even connect to different kind of consciousnesses, like the consciousness of a tree. But it's not like, okay, you stand in front of the tree and you talk and you are receiving something back from external, but it's more like an inner perception. You can observe your inner perception and become aware of what's going on inside. How does this presence of this certain kind of tree impact you? How does it feel? So therefore, to me, this is an invitation to open up and be more open to see consciousness around us. Because the way we are brought up now, the way we are told what consciousness is, it's actually very disconnecting. It's disconnecting us from each other, from the other human being. It's disconnecting us from our environment. So in order to regain our own connection, it's also helpful to reconnect to the consciousness within everything around us as well, and acknowledging our own consciousness, our own soul awareness by that. So let me know what you think about that. I'd be happy to hear your comments, and looking forward to seeing you next time. Take care and talk soon. Goodbye.